So I wanted to also note the importance of this year. 2020 is a huge, huge year for international diplomacy. First of all, it is the 25th anniversary of the 4th Women's World Conference in Beijing, which of course produced the most progressive outline ever for women's and girls' rights. It's called the Beijing Platform for Action. I know many of you have read it, and some of you were there when it was accepted. It's also the 20th anniversary of Security Council 1325. That's a Security Council resolution where finally the Security Council at the United Nations thought, wow, it might be a very beneficial thing to have women and girls involved in peacemaking, seeing as women and girls bear the brunt, oftentimes, of situations of war. It's also the 10th anniversary of UN Women, the newest UN entity, which takes on issues surrounding ending gender-based violence, health and wellness and education of women and girls. It's also the 25th anniversary of my favorite working group here at the United Nations. I'm happy to say that the Loreto community is a proud member of the Working Group on Girls, which was first envisioned in Beijing by women from Africa, lifting up the reality that in Africa, in African countries at least, the reality of girls is very different from that of boys. So they can't be just lumped in with children, and very different than that of women as well. Finally, well, there are several other anniversaries going on, but the other big one is the 75th anniversary of the United Nations itself. So there's lots going on there, and I want to turn your attention right now, those of you on Zoom, to the PowerPoint that you'll see in front of you, because it talks about how a commission on the status of women gathering each year typically works. You'll see that it starts with local organizing. You'll hear about some of that from Sister Mary Peter. Then we have national reviews, regional reviews in different parts of the world, then expert group meetings and reports from those expert group meetings, which typically leads to agreed conclusions, which are official recommendations from the United Nations that then go to the General Assembly of the UN from the Economic and Social Council, which runs all the commissions. And that, I can't say it becomes law, but it becomes shared consensus among the world that this is the ideal we should all be shooting for. Now this year, because what was created 25 years ago was so progressive, and we have so much yet to do to fully fulfill Beijing Platform for Action, they simply went for a political declaration so we don't move backwards. This year is unique in that sense. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Amy to talk more about how the Commission on the Status of Women meeting in March that was cut short is only just one piece of a larger effort in 2020. Take it away, Amy.
Awesome. Okay, we're gonna switch camera holders for a second, if that's all right with everyone. And Francesca, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, hi everyone, this is Amy. I'm just going to very briefly and quickly try to contextualize some of the activities that have been leading up to the celebration of Beijing+25, both from the perspective of UN agencies and from civil society, which is other NGOs and non-governmental organizations like us. So all of these slides are actually created by the NGO Committee on Status of Women, and it's a great resource, and I'm more than happy to send all of this out in greater detail for folks to check it out and read through really carefully after our event during webinar today as well. So let's get my way to the next slide. So there are from the perspective of the United Nations, the celebration of Beijing+25 is really focused on the Generation Equality Forum, and this is a forum that is being sponsored by the countries of Mexico and France, as well as UN Women. And they are gathering throughout this year in an effort to really revisit what was discussed during the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995 and make sure it's up to date and include as many members from across the world, women and girls, from non-governmental organizations, from the private sector, to government officials as well, and just regular people in this conversation. Now, originally the goal was to meet first at the CSW this year, and then following they would have a meeting in both Paris and then in Mexico. And we are not totally sure what that is going to look like. That is whether those meetings are still going to occur or they're going to be postponed to different times. So do you want to go into the next slide? Just a couple overview of the objectives. I talked about this a little bit briefly, but just to talk about it with a bit more specificity. The goal in terms of this Generation Equality Forum that is incorporating all of these different perspectives into the conversation is to really galvanize global activists to speak against oppression and to further create infrastructure and platforms that we can continue to develop towards gender equity. Next slide, please. So that, what I just talked about in terms of generation equality, again, that is sponsored by member states, so it's in UN agencies, so UN Women, the countries of France, and the country of Mexico. There is another arm, I guess, of the Beijing+25 space that has been really led by civil society, and that is the Feminist and Women's Movement Action Plan. And this has been really developed by various civil society activists, and specifically is really being kind of secretaried and logistically led by the NGO Committee on the Status of Women, which is located here in New York and who we get to interact with a lot here as part of the Loretto community at the United Nations as well. So what their vision is really quite similar and in parallel to the generation equality vision, but just with really focusing on using the power of existing political commitments to not totally reinvent the system, but to really bring the voices of women and girls at the grassroots level and amplify those as much as possible. So they are really guiding the conversation. So there's a couple of parts of this process in terms of the Feminist and Women's Movement Action Plan. So the two components are kind of the movers and the shapers. And the shapers are all of the women and girls at the grassroots level who are speaking up and galvanizing their voices during this time. The movers are kind of the logistical arm behind the Feminist and Women's Action Movement, who are meant to be really taking note and capturing all of the conversation that is happening from women and girls at the grassroots, and then organizing it and culminating it together to then project, use it to really guide the advocacy strategy towards the United Nations and towards member states. This is a roadmap that's from NGO-CSW. I'm going to kind of skim over it for the moment, and people can definitely revisit it later. But the one thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that one of the crucial steps was meeting for the 64th Commission on the Status of Women. And since that has been postponed, that's going to be a little bit in flux. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that the original roadmap also included meeting in Mexico and Paris at those dates that are up on the screen. And again, those might also be in flux, but the movement is definitely still in action and still striving towards creating this new and updated political and strategic advocacy agenda for gender equality. But the idea is really for all of this, the Generation Equality Forum and the Feminist and Women's Action Movement Action Plan to culminate at the 2020 General Assembly, which typically is right at the beginning of the fall in September. And the idea is to have a full day that's dedicated to what this entire global conversation on gender equity has been covering this entire year. So that's just a little bit of context